Like the other engines, the paid engines of growth is powered by a feedback loop. Each customer pay a certain amount of money for the product over his or her lifetime as a customer. Once variable costs are deducted, this usually is called the customer lifetime value (LTV). This revenue can be invested in growth by buying advertising. Suppose an advertisement costs $100 and causes 50 new customers to sign up for the service. This ad has a cost per acquisition CPA of $2. In this example, if the product has an LTV that is greater than $2, the product will grow. The margin between the LTV and the CPA determines how fast the paid engine of growth will run. This is this is called the marginal profit. Conversely, if the CPA remains at $2, but the LTV falls below $2, the company growth will slow. It may make the difference with one time tactics such as using invested capital or publicity stunt, but those tactics are not sustainable. This was the fate of many failed companies, including notable .com flamed out that earnestly believed that they could lose money on each customer, but as the old joke goes, make it up in volume. Although I have explained the paid engine of growth in terms of advertising, it is far broader than that. Startups that employ an outbound sales force are also using this engine, as are retail companies. They rely on foot traffic. All these costs should be factored into the cost per acquisition. For example, one startup I work with built collaboration tools for teams and groups. It went through a radical pivot, switching from a tool that was used primarily by hobbyists and a small club to that was sold primarily to enterprises, non-governmental organization, NGOs, and other extremely large organization. However, they made that customer segment pivot without changing their engine of growth. Previously, they had done customer acquisition online using a web based direct marketing technique. I remember one early situation in which the company fielded a call from a major NGOs that wanted to buy its product and roll it out across many divisions. The startup had an unlimited pricing plans. It most expensive that cost only a few $100s per month. The NGO literally could not make the purchase because it had no process in place for buying something so impressive. Additionally, the NGO needed substantial help in managing the rollout, education its staff on the new tool, and tracking the impact of the change of those were all services the company was ill equipped to offer. Changing customer segments required them to switch to hire a sizable outbound sales staff that spend time attending conference, educating, executing, and authoring white papers. Those much higher costs came with a corresponding reward. The company switched from making only a few dollars per customer to making tens and then hundreds of thousands of dollars per much larger customers. Their new engine of growth led to sustain success. Most source of customer acquisition are subject to competition. For example, prime retail storefronts have more foot traffic and are therefore more valuable. Similarly, advertising that is target to more affluent customer generally cost more than advertising that reach the general public. What determines these prices is the average value earned in aggregate by the companies that are in competition for any given customer attention. Wealthy consumer cost more to reach because they tend to become more profitable customer. Over time, any source of customer acquisition will tend to have its CGPA bid up by this competition. If anyone in an industry makes the same amount of money on each sale, they all will wind up paying most of their marginal profit of the source of acquisition. Thus, the ability to grow in the long term by using the paid engine requires a differentiate ability to monetize a certain set of customers. IMBU is a case in point. Our customers were not considered very lucrative by other online services. They included a lot of teenagers, low income adults, and international customers. Other services tends to assume those people would not pay for anything online. At IMBUs, we develop techniques for collecting online payments from customers who did not have a credit card, such as allowing them to bill to their mobile phones or send us cash in the mail. Therefore, we could afford to pay more to acquire those customer than our competitors could. A technical caveat. Technical more than one engine of growth can operate in a business at a time. For example, there are products that have extremely fast viral growth as well as extremely low customer churn rates. Also, there is no reason why a product cannot have both high margins and high retention. However, in my experience, successful startup usually focus on just one engine of growth, specializing in everything that is required to make it work. Companies that attempt to build a dashboard that includes all three engines tend to cause a lot of confusion because the operation expertise required to model all these effects simultaneously is quite complicated. Therefore, I strongly recommend that the startup focus on one engine at a time. Most entrepreneurs already have a strong leap of faith hypothesis about which engine is most likely to work. If they do not, time spent of the building with customer will quickly suggest one that seems profitable. Only after pursuing one engine slowly should a startup consider a pivot to one of the other. Engines of the growth determines product market fit. Mark Alriston, the legendary entrepreneur and investor and one of the father of the World Wide Web, coined the terms product market fit to describe the movement when a startup finally finds a widespread set of customers that resonate with its product. In a great market, a market with lots of real potential customers, the market pulls product out of the startup. This is the story of search keyword advertising, internet auctions, and the TCP/IP routers. Conversely, in a terrible market, you can make the best product in the world and an absolutely killer teams, and it doesn't matter, you are going to fail. When you see a startup that has found a fit with a large market, is exhilarating. It leaves no room for doubt. It is Ford Model T flying out of the factory as fast as it could be made. Facebook sweeping college campuses practically overnight, or Lotus taking the business world by storm. Selling $54 million worth of Lotus 123 in its first year of operation. A startup occasionally asks me to help them evaluate whether they have achieved product market fit. It's easy to answer if you are asking, you are not there yet. Unfortunately, this doesn't help companies figure out how to get closer to product market fit. How can you tell if you are on the verge of success or hopelessly far away? Although I don't think Anderson intended this is a part of his definition, to many entrepreneurs it implies that a pivot is a failure even our startup has failed to achieve product market fit. It also implies the inverse, that once our product has achieved product market fit, we won't have to pivot anymore. Both assumptions are wrong. I believe the concept of the engine of growth can put the idea of product market fit on a more rigorous footing, since each engine of growth can be defined quantitatively. Each has a unique set of metrics that can be used to evaluate whether a startup is on the verge of achieving product market fit. A startup with a viral coefficient of zero point 0.9 or more is on the verge of success. Even better, the metrics for each engine of growth work in tandem with the innovation accounting model discussed in Chapter 7 to give direction of a startup product development effort. For example, if a startup is attempting to use the viral engine of growth, it can focus its development efforts on things that might affect customer behavior on the viral loop and safely ignore those that do not. Such a startup does not need to specialize in marketing, advertising, or sales functions. Conversely, a company using the paid engine needs to develop those marketing and sales functions urgently. A startup can evaluate whether it is getting closer to product market fit as it runs its engine by evaluating each trip through the build major lean feedback loop. Using innovation accounting, what really matters is not the raw numbers or vanity metrics, but the direction and degree of progress. For example, imagine two startups that are working diligently to tune the sticky engine of growth. One had a compounding rate of growth of 5% and the other 10%. Which company is the better bet? On the surface, it may seem that the larger rate of growth is better, but what if each company innovation accounting dashboard look like the following chart? Compounding growth rate as of company A, company B. 6 months ago, 0.1%, 9.8%, 5 months ago, 0.5%, 9.6%, 4 months ago, 2.0%, 9.9%, 3 months ago, 3.2%, 9.8%, 2 months ago, 4.5%, 9.7%, 1 month ago, 5.0%, 10.0%. Even with no insight into these two companies' growth numbers, we can tell the company A is making real progress, whereas company B is stuck in the mud. This is true even though company B is growing faster than company A right now. When engine run out, getting a startup engine of growth up and running is hard enough. But the truth is that every engine of growth eventually runs out of gas. Every engine is tied to a given set of customers and their related habits, preference, advertisement channels, and interconnections. At some point, that set of customers will be exhausted. This may take a long time or a short time depending on the industry and timing. Chapter 6 emphasizes the importance of building the minimum viable product in such a way that it contains no additional features beyond that is required by early adopters. Following that strategy successfully will unlock an engine of growth that can reach that target audience. However, making the transition to mainstream customer will require tremendous additional work. Once we have a product that is growing among early adopters, we could, in theory, stop work in product development. The limits of that early market, then growth would level off or even stop completely. The challenge comes from the fact that this slowdown might take months or even years to take place. Recall from Chapter 8 that IMBUs failed this task at first for precisely this reason, some unfortunate companies wind up following this strategy inadvertently because they are using vanity metrics and traditional accounting. They think they are making progress when they see their number growing. They falsely believe they are making their product better when in fact they are having no impact on customer behavior. The growth is all coming from an engine of growth that is working, running efficiently to bring in new customer, not from improvement driven by product development. Thus, when the growth suddenly slows, it provokes a crisis. This is the same problem that established companies experienced. Their past success were built on a finely tuned engine of growth. If the engine runs its course and growth slows or stops, there can be a crisis if the company does not have any startup incubating within its rank that can provide a new source of growth. Companies of any size can suffer from this perpetual affliction. They need to manage a portfolio of activities simultaneously, tuning their engine of growth and developing new source of growth for when that engine inevitably runs its course. How to do this is the subject of chapter 12. However, before we can manage that portfolio, we need an organization structure, cultures, and discipline that can handle this rapid and often unexpected changes. I call this an adaptive organization, and it is subject of chapter 11. Chapter 11, Adept. When I was the CTO of IMVUs, I thought I was doing a good job. Most of the time, I had built an agile engineering organization, and we were successfully experimenting with the techniques that would come to be known as the lean startup. However, on a couple of occasions, I suddenly realized that I was failing at my job. For an achievement oriented person, that is incredibly disarming. Worst of all, you don't get a memo. If you did, it would read something like this: Dear Eric, congratulations, the job you used to do at this company is no longer available. However, you have been transferred to a new job in the company. Actually, it's not the same company anymore, even though it has the same name and many of the same people, and also the job has the same title too. And you used to be a good at your old job. You're already failing at the new one. This transfer is effective as of 6 months ago. So this is to alert you that you already been failing at it for quite some time. Best of luck. Every time this happened to me, I struggled to figure out what to do. I knew that as the company grew, we would need additional processes and system design to coordinate the company's operations at each larger size. And yet I had also seen many startup becomes ossified and bureaucrat- bureaucratic out of the misplaced desire to become professional. Having no systems at all was not an option for IMVUs and is not an option for you. There are so many ways for a startup to fail. I've lived through the over architecture failure in which attempting to prevent all the various kinds of problems that could occur would up delaying the companies from putting out any product. I've seen companies fail the other way from the so-called Friendster effect, suffering a high-profile technical failure just when customer adopting is going well. As a department executive, this outcome is worst of all because the failure is both high profile and attributable to a single function or department. Yours. Not only will the company fails, it will be your fault. Most of the advice I've heard on this topic has suggested a kind of a split the difference approach, as in engage in a little planning but not too much. The problem with this willy-nilly approach is that it's hard to give any rationale for why we should anticipate one particular problem but ignore another. It can feel like the boss is being capricious or arbitrary, and that feeds the common feeling that management decision conceals an ulterior motive. For this being managed this way, their incentives are clear. If the boss tends to split the difference, the best way to influence the boss and get what you want is to take the most extreme position possible. For example, if one group is advocating for an extremely lengthy release cycle, say an annual new product introduction, you might choose to argue for an equally extremely short release cycle, perhaps weekly or even daily, knowing that the two opinions will be averaged out. Then, when the difference is split, you likely to get an outcome closer to what you actually wanted in the first place. Unfortunately, this kind of arm race escalates. Rivals in another camp are likely to do the same thing. Over time, everyone will take the most polarized position possible, which makes the splitting the difference ever more difficult and ever less successful. Managers have to take responsibility for knowingly or inadvertently creating such incentive, although it was not their intention to reward extreme polarization. That's exactly what they are doing. Getting out of this trap requires a significant shift in thinking. Building an adoptive organization. Should a startup invest in a training program for new employees? If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have laughed and said, absolutely not. Training programs are for big companies that can afford them. Yet at IMBUs, we wound up building a training program that was so called new hires were productive on their first day of employment. Within just a few weeks, those employees were contributing a high level. It required a huge effort to standardize our work processes and prepare a curriculum of the concept that new employees should learn. Every new engineers would be assigned a mentor who would help the new employee work through a curriculum of system concepts and techniques he or she would need to become productive at IMBUs. The performance of the mentor and mentee were linked, so the mentors took this education seriously. What is interesting looking back at this example is that we never stopped work and decided that we needed to build a great training program. Instead, the training program evolved organically, organically out of a methodological approach to evolving our own process. This process of orientation was subject to constant experimentation and revise so that it grew more effective and less burdensome over time. I call this building an adaptive organization, one that automatically adjusts its process and performance to current condition. Can you go too fast? So far, this book has emphasized the importance of the speed. Startup are in life or that struggle to learn how to build a sustainable business before they run out of resources and die. However, focusing on a speed alone would be destructive to work. Startup require built-in speed regulators that help team find their optimal pace of work. We saw an example of a speed regulation in Chapter 9 with the use of the add-on code in systems such as continuous development. It is epitomized in the paradoxical Toyota proverb stop production so the production never has to stop. The key to the add-on code is that it brings work to a stop as soon as an uncorrectable quality problem surfaces, which force it to be investigated. This is one of the most important discoveries of the lean manufacturing movement. You cannot trade quality for time. If you are causing or missing quality problems now, the resulting defect will slow you down later. Defect cause a lot of rework, low morale, and customer complaint, all of which slow progress and eat away at valuable resources. So far, I have used the language of physical products to describe these problems, but that is simply a matter of convenience. Service business have the same challenges. Just ask any managers of a training, staffing, or hospitality firm to show you the playbook that specify how employees are supposed to deliver the service under various conditions. What might have started out as a simple guide tends to grow inexorable over time. Pretty soon, orientation is incredibly complex, and employees have invested a lot of time and energy in learning the rules. Now, consider an entrepreneurial manager in that kind of company trying to experiment with new rules of procedures. The higher quality the existing playbook is, the easier it will be for it to evolve over time. By contrast, a low quality playbook will be filled with contradictory or ambiguous rules that cause confusion when anything is changed. When I teach the lean startup approach to entrepreneurs with an engineering background, this is one of the hardest concepts to grasp. One hand, the logic of validated learning and the minimum viable product say that we should get a product into customer hand as soon as possible, and that any extra work we do beyond that is required to learn from customer is waste. On the other hand, the build majorly learn feedback loop is a continuous process. We don't stop after one minimum viable product but use what we have learned to get to work immediately on the next iteration. Therefore, shortcuts taken in product quality design or infrastructure today may wind up slowing a company down tomorrow. You can see this paradox in action at IMVU's Chapter 3 recounted how we wound up shipping a product to customer that was full of bugs, missing features, and bad design. The customer wouldn't even try that product, and so most of that work had to be thrown away. It's a good thing we didn't waste a lot of time fixing those bugs and cleaning up that early version. However, as our learning allowed us to build products that customer did want, we face slowdowns. Having a low quality product can inhibit learning when the defect prevents customer from experiencing and giving feedback on the product's benefit. In IMBU's case, as we offered the products to more mainstream customers, they were much less forgiving than early adopters had been. Similarly, the more features we added to the product, the harder it became to add even more because of the risk that a new feature would interfere with an existing feature. The same dynamics happens in a service business since any new rules may conflict with existing rules, and the more rules, the more possibilities for conflict. IMUs use the technique of this chapter to achieve sales and quality in just in time fashion. The wisdom of the five whys. To accelerate lean startup needs a process that provides a natural feedback loop. When you are going too fast, you cause more problems. Adaptive process force you to slow down and invest in preventing the kinds of problems that are currently wasting time. As those preventive efforts pay off, you naturally speed up again. Let's return to the questions of having a training program for new employees without a program. New employees will make mistakes while in their learning curve that will require assistance and interventions from other teams member, slowing everyone down. How do you decide if the investment in training is worth the benefit of speed due to reduced interruptions? Figuring this out from a top-down perspective is challenging because it requires estimation to complete unknown quantities. How much it will cost to build an unknown program against known benefit you might reap. Even worse, the traditional way to make these kind of decision is decidedly large batch thinking. A company either has an elaborate training program or it does not. Until they can justify the return on investment from building a full program, most companies generally do nothing. The alternative is to use a system called the five whys to make incremental investment and evolve the startup process gradually. The core that idea of five whys is to tie investment directly to this prevention of the most problem problematic symptoms. The system takes its names from the investigative method of asking the questions why five times to understand what has happened, the root cause. If you have ever had to answer a precocious child who wants to know why is the sky blue and keep asking why, after each answer you are familiar with it. This technique was developed as a systematic problem solving tool by Taichi Ono, the father of the Toyota production system. I have adopted it for use in the lean startup model with a few changes designed specifically for startup. At the root of every seemingly technical problems is a human problem. Five Whys provides an opportunity to discover what that human problem might be. Tichi Ono gives the following example. When confronted with a problem, have you ever stopped and asked why five times? It is difficult to do even though it sounds easy. For example, suppose a machine stops functioning. Number one, why did the machine stop? There was an overload and fuse blew. Number two, why was there an overload? The bearing was not sufficiently lubricated. Number three, why was it not lubricated sufficiently? The lubrication pump was not pumping sufficiently. Number four, why was it not pumping up sufficiently? The shell of the pump was worn and rattling. Number five, why was the shaft worn out? There was no strainer attached and metal scrub got it. Repeating why five times like this can help uncover the root problem and correct it. If this procedure were not carried through, one might simply replace the fuse or the pump shaft. In that case, the problem would recur within a few months. The Toyota production system has been built on the practice and evolution of this scientific approach by asking and answering why five times. We can get to the real cause of the problem, which is often hidden behind more obvious symptoms. Note that even In oh no, relatively simple example, the root cause moves away from a technical fault, a blown fuse, and towards a human error. Someone forget to attach a strainer. This is a completely typical of most problem that a startup face no matter what industry they are in. Going back to our service business example, most problems that at first appear to be individual mistakes can be tracked back to problems in training or the original playbook for how the service is to be delivered. Let me demonstrate how using the five whys allow us to build the employee training system that was mentioned earlier. Imagine that at IMBUs we suddenly start receiving complaint from customer about the new versions of the product that we have just released. Number one, a new release disable a feature for customer. Why? Because a particular server failed. Number two, why did the server fail? Because an obscure subsystem was used in the wrong way. Number three, why was it used in the wrong way? The engineer who used it didn't know how to use it properly. Number four, why didn't he knew? Because he was never trained. Number five, why wasn't he trained? Because his manager doesn't believe in training new engineers because he or his team are too busy. What began as a purely technical fault is revealed quickly to be a very human managerial issues. Make a proportional investment. Here's how to use five whys analyzed to build an adaptive organization. Consistently make a proportional investment at each of the five levels of the hierarchy. In other words, the investment should be smaller within the symptoms is minor and larger when the symptoms is more painful. We don't make large investment in prevention unless we coping with large problems. In the example above, the answer is to fix the server, change the subsystem to make it less error prone, educate the engineers, and yes, have a conversation with the engineer manager. This latter piece, the conversation with the manager is always hard, especially in a startup. When I was a startup manager, if you told me I needed to invest in training my people, I would have told you it was a waste of time. There were always too many other things to do. I probably have said something sarcastic like, sure, I'd be happy to do that if you can spare my time for the 8 weeks I'll take to set up. That's manager speak for no way in hell. That's why the proportional investment approach is so important. If the outage is a minor glitch, it's essential that we make only a minor investment in fixing it. Let's do the first R of the 8 week plan. That's that may not sound like much, but it's a start. If the problem recur, asking the five whys will require that we continue to make progress on it. If the problem does not occur again and R isn't a big loss, I use the example of engineering training because that was something I was reluctant to invest in at IMBUs. At the outset of our venture, I thought we needed to focus all of our and energies on building and marketing our product. Yet once we enter a period of rapid hiring, repeated five whys session revealed that problem caused by lack of training was slowing down product development. At no point did we drop everything to focus slowly solely on training. Instead, we made incremental improvement to the process constantly, each time reaping incremental benefits. Over time, those changes compound, freeing up with com- compounded, freeing up time and energy that previously had been lost to the firefighting and crisis management. Automate speed regulators. The five whys approach act as a natural speed regulator. The more problems you have, the more you invest in solution to those problems. As the investment in infrastructure process may the severity and the numbers of crises are reduced and the team is speed up again. With startup in particular, there is a danger that teams will work too fast, trending quality for time in a way that causes sloppy mistakes. 5 Y prevents that, allowing teams to find their optimal pace.